All right, we are live. How's it going, everyone? It's Jesse. Happy Friday to all of you out there. I hope you've all had an amazing day and amazing week. Let's see here. All right, cool. We are live. We are on. This is a last minute little video tutorial I'm going to be making on how to create skinny lines in your paintings. One of the most common questions I get, or one of the most common struggles I hear newer painters and sometimes not so newer painters have, is in making little skinny lines. So we're going to talk about that. It's not going to be a very long video. It's not going to be a complete comprehensive list on how to make little skinny lines, but we are going to go over some of the most common tips and tricks that I use when I make little tiny lines. Okay, so there are a few things that you want to keep in mind. There are three main things that I always notice that are important, or that I know are important when you make skinny lines. What's happening, Karen? If I don't see your comments, folks, again, this wasn't a planned session. I'm just jumping on here to make a quick video around making these skinny lines. But put your comments down, put your questions down. If you guys have any questions about anything or ideas on some tutorials that you'd like to see in the future. But anyway, the stability of your wrist or your hand when you're painting, that's one. And we'll talk about how to stabilize your hand a little bit when I demonstrate. I'm going to be using, I've got a couple of mixed media pads over here that I'll be demonstrating some techniques on, but hand stability is one, and there are some things that you can do to help with that. I know some people, your hand shakes a little bit. Maybe you drink too much coffee. Some people, just have more of a natural shake in their hands. There are some ways to help with that, so we'll talk about that. But second thing is the actual tools that you use, the brushes that you use to paint with. There's the right tool for the right type of skinny line that you want to make. And there's no one brush that you would be using. There's a variety of brushes that you can use, a variety of types of brushes that you can use. You're going to want to experiment a bit, because just because I like using a particular type of brush to make a skinny line, you may enjoy using a different brush. It all depends on preference and comfort and how you hold the brush and all that good stuff. Okay, so I am going to be going through a few different brushes and show you how to use each of those to make little tiny skinny lines. Oh, Bobby, how's it going, Bobby? And Anna and Karen, what's up? So Bobby Ringle or Ring? Yeah, Ringle has a question around the Halloween challenge. So the Halloween challenge is Pacific time, okay? All of the time frames are Pacific. So, and I don't remember what those time frames are off the top of my head. I think they're either 2 or 3 p.m. Pacific time. So wherever you are, you're going to want to calculate, right? Whether you're West Coast time, East Coast time. Obviously, Pacific time is West Coast, but East Coast or Central, etc. If you have any questions, send me a message and I'll help you figure out. Just send me a message as to where you are, and I'll help you figure that out. Okay. But yeah, Pacific time on all those times. But anyhow, so again, those three things with making nice skinny brush lines is hand stability, tool selection, what brush you're using, and then the other thing is paint. What kind of paint are you using? Are you using a heavier bodied acrylic paint? Or are you using a softer bodied acrylic paint? Because they do have, they work a little bit differently. Typically, you're going to want to add a little bit of water. Whichever paint you're using, you're going to want to add a little bit of water, because that will help thin out the paint, and you're able to make smaller, skinnier lines with that. You got it, Bobby. My pleasure. If you guys are interested in that Halloween challenge, I do have a link in the description of this video. If you guys click on that, it'll take you and give you all the information around that. It's a free event. We're going to be holding it's a group that I've made here under Painting with Jesse called the 3-Day Halloween Challenge, real basic. So if you guys click on that link, it'll give you all the information on that. Okay, there are some stencils that you want to download to be ready for that. I'm going to be posting some videos on the event page on how to use the stencils here pretty soon. So some of you guys may not be clear how that would work. I'll give you guys some ideas around that. But again, description in the video, and the link is in the description of the video. All right, so anyway, I'm going to go through and show you guys on my mixed media pads here how to use those different types of brushes to make skinny lines. Now, usually when somebody's going to go and they know they have to make some small lines. You got some outlining, you got a painting, you got to outline, you got to paint grass or hair, reeds, the stems on flowers. Most people reach out and grab. Let me change the view on my screen here. Give me a second. I want to. Okay, all right. Give me a second here. Got a message from StreamYard, which is the platform that I'm using. There we go. So typically, when somebody's going to make a small, skinny line, they reach out for one of these smaller types of brushes. A round, which is the one on the left, is I've got a number 3 round brush, or they'll grab a liner brush. This is a 000 liner brush, a very skinny brush with which to make lines. And these are excellent. These are excellent to make skinny lines with, but these are not the only ones that you can use. You can also use brushes such as flat brushes. It all depends on how big of a line you need to make. But even this big 1-inch flat brush, as long as I can get those bristles to squeeze together tightly, I can use this to make a nice skinny line. I can even draw with this. It just depends on how big of an object or shape I'm creating. But flat brushes, and I sometimes use these to make my skinny lines, are really good. What's nice about a flat brush is there's actually a little bit of stability that the bristles, because you've got a wider area to work with, there's some stability that's created there that helps you maintain a straight line. Again, I'm going to be demonstrating with each of these types of brushes in a bit, but I just want to show you the variety of brushes that I use to create skinny lines. Another good option is a filbert. Now, these filberts have rounded edges, and they're good for making things like petals and, painting on the inside of rounded edges, like you've got a circle or something, and you need to paint on the inside. You can use these guys. It helps you stay on the inside of that curved edge. But these are also really good for making skinny lines. Again, the main point is that these edges on the bristles can get together nice and tight. Squeeze those nice and tight to make a nice skinny edge. Okay, so there's those. And then another good brush is an angular brush. Now, these brushes have a nice angled edge, but again, because you can get those bristles to get in nice and tight, they're good for making skinny lines. All these brush types, maintenance is important, because if your bristles start to splay out over time, they start to separate. Now you can't get a skinny edge. Okay, so really important that you maintain your brushes. Very, very important. All right. Let's see. Any other questions? Let's see. You think it's at 3 hours? Yep. Anna Alfano at 3 hours. It depends on where you are. Yeah. So sometimes, depending on where you are, what Anna's saying, as far as Facebook will do it for you, when you click on the event and indicate that you're interested or that you're planning on attending, it'll switch the time frame to meet. It changes it to your time zone. Okay. So just kind of be aware that it does do that. So if you indicate that you're planning on going on the event page, it'll change the time frame to meet your time zone. Okay. But anyway, let's get into it. What I'm going to be using right now is I've got this soft-bodied acrylic paint from Artist Loft. This is one of my favorite. It's more of a student body paint. It's not quite a high quality paint. It's not an artist quality paint or professional quality paint, but it's a good paint especially to practice with. It gives you some nice results. What I'm going to do is I've already poured some out here on my plate. I'm going to start with the flat brushes. Okay, I'm going to start with this 1-inch flat brush. I am going to dip my brush into the water a little bit, even though this is a soft body paint. I'm dipping my brush into I've got a water container. I'm cup with some water in it. Just dipping my brush in there, getting some water into this paint a little bit. You notice I'm not going through and adding water to the entire paint area there. I'm just grabbing a little bit off the side and then mixing it in. Now, what's important with this flat brush, it may look really big for skinny lines, but what's important is that the bristles come together nice and thin like this over the top. Now I can take this. Now I can hold the brush from kind of a looser grip towards the back of the handle. Whoops, here we go. And I can just Skinny line, right? Pretty skinny line. Again, it depends on what I'm using it for or the object that I'm making. But that's pretty decent. If I'm making kind of bigger, tall grasses, for example, I can use that kind of a thing. A tall flower stem. Okay. Again, as I mentioned earlier, the wide area of the brush actually gives me a little bit of stability. So it's actually a little easier sometimes with a flat brush to make skinny lines. But the important thing is adding water to your paint and then pressing down on those bristles so they create a nice skinny edge. Okay, so there's a flat brush. And of course, all my other flat brushes work the same way. If I wanted to make thinner lines, skinnier lines, I'd grab a smaller flat brush like this number 4. This is a flat shader, very small brush. Creates a very nice skinny profile when you look at it from the top. And with this, I can make some nice skinny lines as well. Much smaller, much nicer, and even cleaner than that regular flat brush that I used earlier. Now, with something like this, because that area is a little smaller, I can use my finger. If your hand shakes a lot, you can, where you do this on an area, if it's already dried, you can place your finger right on the surface. And all I'm doing is going like this, straight up to the canvas. Okay, I know it's hard to see, my hand's covering what I'm doing, but you would just come straight down, right? Or maybe it's sideways. Okay, nice and skinny, but I'm using my finger here to stabilize it. Place that on the surface, and then let's say I want to make a box. Okay. I know lots of people wouldn't imagine that a squared flat brush could make skinny lines, but you can. Grasses, okay, again, grasses, eyelashes. So you drew a cartoon character and it's got some eyelashes on there. There's some eyelashes. Hair, right? And you can control the thickness of your line by, if you barely touch the surface, it's a light, skinny line. If you press a little harder on the brush, you make a thicker line. Okay, again, this is making skinny lines in this case with a flat brush. Okay, so that's it for my flat brushes. Let me grab, I'm going to take my brushes out of my rinse cup and put them over. I've got a little bin in the back that I have some water in. So the next brush that I want to use, let's see, Amy says, let's see, what do we got as far as comments? Where do you find stars to give? Hi, Judy. That comment's popping up automatically at the top somewhere if you're going to make a comment, I think it gives you an option. I'm not exactly sure where to find it, but thank you, Judy. Jeff says, learning how to do lines and edges with an angled brush was a game changer for me. Absolutely. Angular brushes are some of the best brushes you can use for that. Again, you're going to want to experiment a little bit. Some people prefer using a flat brush. Some people prefer an angled brush. I really like the angled brush. I'm going to demonstrate with one of those here in just a moment, but definitely play around and experiment a little bit. So I've got this. This is a 3/8 angle brush. Okay, very small brush, but you see the difference. It's not quite a flat brush, right? A flat brush would come across. This has an angled edge that goes like that. So same thing. I grab a little bit of water, pick up some paint. I press the bristles down against the plate, making sure that those bristles are compressed together at the top. And these are really nice. Now I'm running out of room on this page here, so I might have to turn it in just a moment. But really nice and easy, skinny little lines. Let me change pages here. Now my mixed media pad is getting a little bit beat up here. This is where I practice a lot. But here we go. So again, I just press it right up against the surface there, and there we go. You can make curved lines. It depends on what you're trying to do with this. This is a fancy brush. You can use it for lots of things, but skinny lines, stems on a branch. If you press lightly when you first start, then you press down a little bit harder, you make a thicker line at the base, right? As if, you've got the ground down here, you got some dirt, maybe you got some, little reeds and grasses down here, but you're, maybe making a stem, that kind of thing. You're going to have a flower up here on top. These little angled brushes are really nice. You can also use some of these brushes. Again, it depends on the size of the object that you're painting, but you could use these to actually outline. Let's say you've drawn a snowman, you got a giant snowman, and you want to, the last step that you would do, or one of the last steps that you would do, is outline it to make it stand out against the background. You've got a background, the snowman isn't quite prominent against that background, you want it to stand out. One of the things that you would do is create a nice outline around it. You could use something like this angled brush to do that, right? To go all the way around our snowman. And of course, you the more carefully you hold that brush against the surface, and then if you use your finger to help support, it stabilizes your hand. You can use your knuckle as well. You press that knuckle against the surface as you paint, and it adds a little stability to your line. The smaller the angle brush, the skinnier your line. Any one of these brushes, the smaller the brush, the skinnier your line, generally speaking. I almost knocked over my little rinse cup. But again, you're going to want to experiment. Lots of people get stuck, or they give up because they try a particular brush, and maybe the brush isn't the adequate brush because it's not the right type. It doesn't form a nice skinny edge when you press those bristles together, which again is very important. Or it's a old beat up brush and all the bristles are splayed apart. So they try it with one of those brushes and they didn't do the job, so they say, I can't make skinny lines. It's very, very important and crucial that you pick the right tool. Even myself, I've been painting for many years. If I grab the wrong brush, trust me that I'm going to struggle making a skinny line with it. Okay, especially if it's an old beat up brush. So you want to experiment. Next brush on the list, the filbert, low rounded edge filbert, right? It's known for its low rounded surface, as I noted earlier. Another good brush to use to make skinny lines. Grab your paint. Actually, let me grab a little bit of water. So dipping that brush into the water cup, grabbing some paint. Okay, I'm going to come in here, and again, I use my finger, and in this case, I'm going to use it at an angle. Okay, I just barely press right up, and this is light pressure. The lighter the pressure, the skinnier the line. And I control the pressure by how much of my finger is on the surface. And so I press the finger first onto the canvas. I place the finger on the canvas, on the surface first, and then I lightly bring my brush down, and now I can make some really light, skinny lines. The more I press down, the wider it becomes. Okay, so that is the filbert. Now I'm just using mostly vertical lines in this case, and slightly curved ones here and there, but you can make them sideways, right? And this one here is actually a number 10 filbert. So if I used a 5 or a 4, anything smaller than this is going to it's going to have a smaller profile and a lot smaller an edge. What's happening, Penny? Stopping to say hello. I will need to try that. I always use the 20. Yep. There you go. Thin lines. Never dare to use the flat brushes. Yeah. So most of the time, people are going to grab the little skinny, pointy brushes for their skinny lines, which is kind of a no-brainer. Those are perfect. And Penny's talking about these guys. Now she's talking about even smaller brushes than these. This little tiny one is a 000 liner. Okay. If you go to one with more zeros, and you'll usually see the number like 5 and then over 0 or 10/over 0. That just indicates more zeros. The more zeros there are, the tinier the brushes you're going to have. Okay, we're talking about these little liner brushes. So people look at these liner brushes and they go, oh yeah, that's what I'm going to use to make a little skinny line. And absolutely, you can. However, these don't always work for everyone, because while you can make a really tiny line with this, let me change pages here. While you can make a really tiny line, there's a lot less stability in this brush because it's got such a small, right? It's just a tiny dot almost. So when you press it up against the surface, as opposed to something like this angle brush, there's less support. Okay, so now you're basically controlling your line with your hand. And this can be a lot trickier. But in this case, what I like to do, if I'm going to make a long line, is I will put my hand right up against the canvas. Again, all this is dry, so I can put my hand right up to it. Let's say I'm going to make little grasses. I just barely come in here. I know these are hard to see, but little tiny lines, right? But if I want to make a long, skinny line, I run my hand across the surface. It stabilizes my hand. Another thing that you can do is since I'm painting on an easel, I can do this. I would take my non-painting hand, put it right up against my table here, put my painting hand right above it, so I create kind of a support. My fingers and my hand can be on the table now, and even I use my finger here. I put it right up against that surface, and here we go. Little tiny skinny lines, right? If I'm going to outline, let's say I've got a character here. I don't know, a flower or something needs a little bit of outlining. I can use this little tiny brush. I can come right up to it, and now I can do my little lines around it. This is an excellent. Or if you're going to draw something, you can also sketch with paint. Oftentimes, instead of sketching with a pencil or chalk, I'll sketch it out. I'll sketch whatever it is I'm going to paint with a brush, and you could take one of these little guys and make whatever it is that you're going to make. Sketch out whatever it is with one of these little guys. But so again, it's not always the best option though, depending on how stable your hand is, that kind of a thing. So again, it's not the only choice. These small skinny brushes are not the only choice to use when you're making your skinny lines. So don't get stuck thinking that you have to use those. Experiment. Usually you're going to learn. So this is the number 3. This is a round number 3. Usually you're going to learn more from experimenting than you will from watching videos. And sure, watching videos, it's excellent, right? You're watching a video right now, but experiment. Don't be afraid to experiment. Use different brushes. Now, what I may prefer in a brush may not be the same as what you like in a brush for a particular thing that you're trying to do. For example, skinny lines, right? You may like the angular brush, you may like the flat brush, you may like the round, you may like the liner brush. But so here's a round brush. I can vary the thickness of the line, again, by the pressure in my wrist. If I press down a little bit harder or I use more of the body in the brush, I get a wider line. Now you see here where the paint starts to kind of, there's less paint in the brush. Every time I go grab a little bit of paint, if there's not already a little bit of water in that mixture, if I didn't already add water to the mixture, I grab a little bit of water with the brush, mix it into the paint right on the plate, like here on the side. And now I can come in here and the paint lasts longer, okay? So the other thing with these round brushes, if I press the brush right up against the plate and I spin it, the tip gets really small, the point gets really skinny, and now I can really come in here and make similar lines to what I did with the little tiny liner brush. Little tiny lines by just barely touching the surface. If I want thicker, I press a little harder. Thicker still, press even harder. But these round brushes are nice and versatile. Okay, so what I'm going to do right now is I've got a little painting that needs a little outlining, and I'm going to show you guys what I mean. So got this little painting that we did the other day in the Finding Your Brushstroke membership, and the little hat, my little scarecrow's hat needs a little bit of an outline. Now, in this case, it's not really necessary. The hat stands out from the background, but if I want it to stand out a little bit more, it could use a little bit of outlining. So I'm going to take some burnt sienna here, and this is a thicker body paint. How do you know that this is a thicker body paint? It comes in a tube like this, and I have to squeeze it. Okay, the other paint, this black paint that I poured out earlier, is a softer body paint. And Normally, softer body paints come in a bottle. If you do this, they pour right out. Okay, a heavier body paint or a thicker body paint usually comes in a tube or a container where you have to squeeze to get the paint to come out. So let's see here. I'm going to use a couple of my brushes here. Which one should I start with? I'm going to start with the round. Okay, and then I'll probably end up using one of the flats and maybe one of the angled brushes. Actually, I'll use as many of the brushes as I can here. So first thing I want to do, because this is a thicker body paint, what did I say? Add a little bit of water to it. Okay, if I hold my plate up like this, the softer body paint is going to slowly start to run down. It's still thick enough where it doesn't happen right away, but it will start to run down. The thicker body paint is going to take much longer to begin to move down the plate, if it moves at all before it dries out. So brush, some water, and I'll do this a couple of times. Now my water's a little dirty. It's okay for what we're doing today. Normally, if I want to keep this burnt sienna as burnt sienna, I would make sure I'm using cleaner water. But in this case, we're okay. So water to the paint, I grab the brush and I spin it, okay, making that point nice and tiny, okay? And I'll come in here. This is all dry, so I can put my hand right up to the canvas. And as I run my hand across like this, I'm hugging the edge, okay? Now I know that's a little hard to see, so let me see here. I'm going to grab a little bit of black, just a touch of black. Normally I would do this with blue, not so much black. I would use a blue or a dark red or something like that, to more of a dark blue to darken up my brown paint. But in this case, we can use a little bit of black. I just wanted to stand out a little bit more against the color of the hat. I used burnt sienna in the hat, a little bit of burnt sienna mixed in with some yellow, but the difference is not quite enough to really stand out. So here we go. Just mixing in some water with my paint here. Again, I spin the brush, making it nice and skinny, and I come right up to the edge. Again, my hand is right here. When I start to move, I go, okay? One of the last things you want to do is go so slowly that your hand's going to start to shake. Usually when I start to move, when I start to create a line, I just go for it. And it's kind of subtle. It's not super dark, but you can see it right there. Let me see. Let me make it a little bit darker so it's a little bit more obvious. So adding a bit more black to my paint. So I'm making a really dark brown. I just want my outline to stand out a bit more. I wasn't planning on doing this one today, but I had a few questions around skinny lines today. Comments made. A couple of times people asked about skinny lines. So I said, you know what? Nice quick tutorial to do around skinny lines. So I'm going to come over here. Okay, now here, I'm going to use a different technique. I'm going to put my hand right on the table, take my painting hand, lay it on top, and I'm also going to use my finger here. I could even go like this, turn this over, and go like that. Okay, this would be easier for me if I did it this way. I turn the painting over, now I go straight down. It's more natural movement for me. Okay, so there's so many different approaches to all this. You're going to want to experiment and use the one that works best for you. But I put my hand here, put my hand right up here. Also take my finger to add a little more stability, and I come across. Again, I'm using just the point of the bristles in this case. Okay, I move across, and there, just did a nice little outline along that hat, along the edge of the hat. That helps the hat stand out a little bit more from that background. This is subtle. It's not really a big, huge difference, but even this little tiny bit of a difference makes a big difference. It's all right, Jill. No big deal. What's happening, Dawn? There you go, Penny. Thank you, Amy. Thank you. I run out of paint for my strokes using the littles. Yes. So that's another thing. When you're using the little tiny brushes like the liner brush, the brush doesn't hold a lot of paint. So you start, and very quickly you have to reload your paint. These bigger brushes like this round number 3. Now these are some nice. These two brushes here are some of my Princeton brushes. These Princeton brushes are really nice quality, not super expensive, but nice quality brushes, and they last a long time. So I take care of these quite well. But the larger the body, the inside part of the brush or the lower part of the brush, the more paint it'll hold, so you can paint for a little bit longer. The smaller the brush, the less paint it holds, and you have to reload again. Sometimes you don't want to do that partway through a line, right? So here we go, other side. And this time I'm going to go, let's see, we can do it like this. We're going to come straight down. Again, this is a little bit more of a natural maneuver for me. I can put my hand right up against the canvas. I know I'm blocking it a little bit. I'm trying not to block what I'm doing, but I put the bristles right up slightly at an angle. Again, once I start, I go. If I'm going to make a line right here, if I go really slowly, my hands are going to shake a little bit more. Once I commit to a line, I just go, and that movement, along with a little bit of confidence that I feel as I'm going, helps me stabilize my painting line. But anyhow, you can use this technique with any one of these brushes. Oh, I did mention I'm going to use a different brush for this too. So let me pick a brush over here. Let me grab let's see. I'm going to grab my number 4 shader, one of my favorite brushes to use. Little number 4 shader. Again, whenever you use a larger brush like a flat or a filbert or an angled brush, what's important is that you can press the bristles together to make a nice skinny, whoops, I was holding the brush too high, nice skinny edge. Okay, so a little bit of water, I grab my paint. Okay, as I'm doing this, I'm double loading the brush, meaning I'm coming over and doing it to both sides. I don't just do it on one side, I do it to the other side also. As I'm doing this though, I'm pressing the brush up against the plate, making that edge nice and skinny. Now I can use this. Let's say that I want to go, I'm going to do it right here. I'm going to come across this way. So this is a little bit trickier because it's down towards the bottom. But again, I don't want to block what I'm doing, but I have no choice, because the way I have to hold the brush, I have to press that brush right up against that surface like this. Okay, in order to use that surface to stabilize my brush stroke. So I put it right up against my edge, and across we go. This line is actually a little bit cleaner than my other line. Why? Because it's a flat brush that adds a little stability to my stroke when I go across that surface. Okay, so there we go, nice little edge there. I can also use this for this long end. I wouldn't go into the curved part because it's too big, but I can use it right here. Okay, now that's a little bit less of a, I'm not using a lot of stability. I'm just kind of quickly going across, not focusing too much on that, on stabilizing my brush stroke, but you can see the difference there. Again, across the top. Okay. So that's a flat brush. Let's go over to, and this is the number 4 flat. Okay, if I went to a number 2, I'd make a skinnier line. Okay, all right, let's see. What else do we got? Angular brush. Where'd my angular go? Moved it over here. There we go. That's the one that I want. All right, my angular. Okay, this one is my 3/8 angular. Here we go again. Again, folks, you commit to a line, go for it. If you go too slowly, your hand is going to shake a little bit. Practice though. Practice with all the brushes that you've got. You can, if one brush doesn't work, go grab another one. Okay, grab a different brush. And then, of course, the other thing is you want to make sure that you clean your brushes. Let's see, I'm going to try to use this angular brush to come across the top here on the top of the hat. Okay. There we go. I stopped talking because I was holding my breath. This way I wouldn't shake when as I breathe, as I was breathing and making my line. So that's the angular brush. Nice, easy little line right over the top of that. Okay. I could use this angular brush to come across the edge of the little shoulder here. Okay. Now that wouldn't be ideal. I would probably want to use the filbert or a smaller, or one of the smaller brushes, but you get the idea. Again, One of the things I want to emphasize is committing to your line when you decide to go. Go with confidence. Hold your breath if you need to. All right. But use your finger for stability. Use your hand for stability. Okay. And turn your canvas if you need to, if it gives you a better chance at that brush stroke. There's all sorts of different ways to make skinny lines. There's no one tool. There's no one technique. But the best thing to do is to experiment. Okay, so make sure you guys get in there and experiment a little bit. Again, some people get really caught up on rules or what they think the rules are supposed to be, or doing it only one particular way. No, I saw this one artist that I really enjoy, and he does it with he uses the angular brush, the 3/8 angular, to make his grasses with, or his flower stems with. So that's what I have to use. That's not the way that it works. If you have a better method with a flat brush or a round brush, etc., then that's what you use. The only way you're going to find out, though, is by experimenting. You want to have a variety of brushes. You want to take care of your brushes after every use, especially your really nice brushes. Clean them with a little bit of soap and water. Don't use overly hot water. You can loosen up the glue that holds those bristles, and over time they'll start to get shedding. The other thing is, when you clean, after you're done cleaning your brushes, reshape them as soon as they're done. Right, you're done cleaning your brush. You've used a little bit of soap and some water. You've rinsed them off, then reshape them. And then lastly, this that I'm doing in a water cup, these are old brushes, but leaving them in my water cup with the weight of the handles pushing down on those bristles over time is going to cause those bristles to get damaged. So instead, if you're going to be using a brush for a while, and it's going to be sitting in your water for a while, which is also something you should try to avoid, leaving your brushes sitting in water for a long time. But I know sometimes that's difficult to do. What I do is I'll take something like this. Now, a tin isn't ideal, but a container with water in it where you can lay your brushes in, your good brushes in, at an angle, and that helps keep that weight off of those bristles. But all those things are key. Maintaining your brushes so they don't get damaged and start to separate. A nice, brush stroke, confident brush stroke, water in your paint. Doesn't matter what kind of paint you're using or what type of thickness of paint you're using. We're talking about acrylic paint here. Similar things hold true for oil paint, for example. You can thin out oil paint. But the thicker the paint, the harder it is to make skinny lines with. So you want to add a little bit of water to it. But even the softer bodied paints, even the really nice flowy paints, you add a little bit of water to it, and it helps that paint adhere to the surface of your whatever it is you're painting on. And you don't have to put as much pressure with your brush so that for that paint to get onto the surface, adhere to the surface. The less pressure you put, the skinnier the line. Okay? So the right brushes, the right paint and water mixture, and then the stability in your hand. And I would say that the fourth one is confidence, going with confidence, and then, of course, experimenting. Okay? I like straight lines. I hate curvy, says Miranda. Yeah, and you could make curvy skinny lines, right? Like I mentioned. So let's say, and maybe I didn't show that. So let me grab my brush here. So depending on the thickness of the line that you're going to make, you could take, and I think I did show it a little bit especially when you're drawing something, you could take your little liner brush and use that to draw. I don't know, whatever it is you're going to make. You're going to make the letter S, right? More water in the paint. You're going to draw an eyeball, a circle, what have you. You can make skinny curved lines. You just have to work at it, stabilize your hand, add plenty of water to your mixture, and then you go. Okay, but if you're not using the right brushes, you're going to suffer. You're going to suffer a bit. So hopefully this helped you guys. Put your questions down below. And if you want to see other tutorials on these little short tutorials on technique, I'll pop in from time to time when I have time and make some. I'm spending a lot of time making content in the my membership group. That takes up a lot of my time. So, I'm spending a lot of time over there trying to give everybody really good quality stuff. But I don't want to abandon my painting with Jesse Page. It's super important to me. So I will be on here painting with you guys also from time to time. I do have a 3-day Halloween challenge set up for the end of the month. It is going to be over 3 days. There's a link in the description of this video if you guys are interested in checking that out. It's a pretty awesome painting that glows under black light. I'm a huge Halloween fan, and that's open to everyone. So if you guys are interested, check out the links in the description of the video. Okay? But all right, everybody, what's happening? Hannah, let me say hello to a few people. Hi, Louisa. How's it going? Let's see. Yep, I know, Amy. I know. Oh, yep. Got to hold your breath a little bit sometimes when you're making those skinny lines. It does help. And you notice I stopped talking, right? When I was making my line, I stopped talking because I had to concentrate a little bit. So that's another secret right there. Let's see. Let me see if I missed anybody. What's happening? Lily, Jen, how are you? Doris, thank you. Yeah, there's lots of different ways. Another way to stabilize your hand when you're making skinny lines is using a paint stick. Now, I don't have one. I don't use one. It's been a long time since I've had one in my studio. But a paint stick, especially on larger canvases or larger surfaces, you use a paint stick. You put it up against the surface, or you hang it almost. You can even use a cane. You hang it up against. Put it up against the canvas. If it's a paint stick, it usually has a soft ball on the end of it. You press it right up. Now you're able to use that. You're holding it with your non-painting hand, and then you put your painting hand right over the top of the stick, and you have a nice stability with that. You build some nice stability with that stick. So anyway, that's another way. There's so many different tips and tricks. No one way to approach painting. There's lots of different ways. You just have to find your best approach, your personal, kind of style, but you do that with experimentation. All right, Bobby. Yeah, there you go. Hey, Bobby, save it for the 3-day challenge. That one's going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait to do that. That one's going to be pretty cool. I'm going to try to have some black lights in the studio. I have a black light flashlight, but I'm going to try to set up a black light so that we had the glow in the dark on the last day, or the glow under black paint on the last day, we can really make it, show up on the video. But all right, everybody, let me see if I missed anyone saying hello. What's happening, Dawn? Ruth, thank you, Ruth. Hi, Vivian, how's it going? I think I said hello to Judy. Of course, Penny's in the house, and Jeff. All right, I think I got everybody. So anyhow, thank you guys all for joining me. The video is a little longer than I expected. I just wanted to come in here and do a little short video. Again, this is not meant to be a complete, comprehensive video on making skinny lines. There's different ways. My main concern was showing you guys how to make nice, straight, skinny lines using different brushes. But all right, Doris, good night from Puerto Rico, she says. Awesome. Good night, Puerto Rico. Good night, Doris. All right, everyone. Have a good one. See y'all very soon. Bye-bye.